Hey folks, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. I don't know if you can hear that bird or not, but it sounds like one of my ducks. It's a bird I've never heard before until quite recent. And it sounds just like one of my Muscovy ducks when she is broody. And I hear it an awful lot, but I have never put my eyes on it. I don't know what it is, folks, so I hope you heard that. And if you heard that, if you can tell me what kind of bird that is, I'd appreciate it. So, yesterday, I received a text, and it was quite urgent. A lady I used to work with, an older lady who has been having some health issues, asked me if I would go over to her daughters and her son-in-laws and see if their garden could be saved. So, they had never gardened before, folks. Ever gardened before. And the lady that contacted me had never gardened before. But this spring, well, last fall, they had a little clearing in the woods, and they cleared a spot, and they made a nice little garden spot for themselves. And when I say garden, the garden is probably as big as mine. They hauled in a bunch of garden dirt, chicken compost, all of that, and really worked it in with the tiller and planted in it this spring. Well, they worked really, really hard and got their garden in, and then tragedy struck in the family. The mother-in-law, well, her mother, his mother-in-law had a stroke, and their daughter came down very, very sick, so they had to go out of state to get treatment, and they just returned this past week. So they got home about in the middle of the night. From what I gather, it was dark and it was very late or early morning, and they went right straight to bed, and she couldn't wait to go see what her garden looked like. And she said she cried, folks. She said, this is what she told me. She said, it might as well be a hayfield. She goes, I can see tops of tomatoes, and she could see, I don't know, some top of her beans, and she could tell where the rows were. But she said, we just went through hell, and we need this garden. We need this garden this year. She goes, is there any way to save our garden? So the husband had already gotten the rototiller all gassed up and was going to rototill the garden and get it ready for next year. So I went over. It's about 10 minutes out of my way from where I have to come home from work. So I stopped in, and she said, you're going to get wet. She goes, I don't want you to get your shoes all wet. She goes, do you have any boots with you? And I said, no, but I have a pair of old sneakers that I carry in my vehicle. Let me go put them on, and an extra pair of socks. I said, let's go check out your garden. And folks, when they said I was going to get wet, there was a lot of water in that garden. I asked where all the water was coming from, because it was on a slope. It shouldn't have been that wet. It wasn't in a low area, and with the water table being so dry, it really surprised me that there was so much water in that garden. I said, where's this water coming from? And she goes, the well, right there. We hit a good vein when we had that drilled, and it's flowing like 3 or 4 gallons right over the top of the well. an hour, 3 or 4 gallons, just flowing right out from the top of the well, right straight down across their garden, which is absolutely perfect for a year like this year. So you can imagine the weeds, right? So we started walking around, and we started where the potatoes were. And the potatoes had gotten eaten pretty bad by the potato bugs, and she didn't know what kind of bugs they were. Remember, they have never gardened before, folks. They did enough research. They knew how to amend the soil. They knew how to plant. They knew what they wanted to plant, where, what, and how. But they didn't get to the point where how to take care of the garden, as in looking for bugs, which bugs are beneficial, which bugs were not. She goes, we have these real pretty striped, hard-shelled bugs on our, she goes, what used to be our potato plants. She goes, they're awfully pretty. I said, they may be pretty, but you need to get rid of them. So she started getting right at them and taking them and squishing them. She had gloves on, squishing them, killing them. And she goes, this is going to take forever. Look at how many there are. And I said, well, you got to keep on top of them. You've got to get them. I said, you've got cucumber beetles here. You've got Japanese beetles here. You've got a major slug issue in your green bean patch. And I said, I would put that rototiller away for right now, unless you want to mark the rows where the vegetable rows were. And if you want to rototill in between those rows, I said, you can do that. I said, but you can't rototill up close to the plants, and you can't pull the weeds up close to the plants, because my God, folks, when she said it looked like it could be hayed, it looked like it could be hayed. And I explained pulling the grass up will also pull some of the plants up. So I helped them do that for a little bit. And again, it was about 95, and it was in the sun, and I had already put in a 10-hour day, right? So I helped them a little bit, and she goes, we're going to rototill up those potato plants, and we'll plant something else there. And I said, well, have you checked to see if there's any potatoes there? She said, no, look at these plants. Look at these plants. She goes, there's nothing left of these plants. I said, you still may have potatoes. So I reached down, and I dug down in, and I pulled up what was left of a plant, folks. Dug down in, and they had a few potatoes this big. You know, she was tickled right to death, and he said, I'll be damned. I'll be damned. We actually have potatoes. I said, you leave them right there and see what happens to them. So then we went to the string bean section. The string beans, the slugs had a feast on them, folks. So we decided that, yes, they should rototill that green bean row up as well. Excuse me, folks. I just had a handful of green beans myself from the garden. So the tomatoes look good. They need to be weeded. The peppers hadn't seen light in a long time, but the plants looked, even though the plants were a little spindly and a little pale, they looked really good. So I told them that they needed to weed around the pepper plants. They had probably a 20-foot row of pepper plants, folks, to allow the sun and the warmth to get at those roots. And we went row to row to row to row. She had some nice beets about this big, about the same size as the potatoes, folks. The cabbage weren't worth anything. The bugs had gotten in the cabbage, and they're really, you couldn't even get an evening meal out of their cabbage patch. But all in all, folks, they saved, or will save, or can save about half of their garden. Of course, the lettuce had gone by. A lot of plants had bolted. You know, the broccoli had bolted. The lettuce had bolted. Some of their greens had bolted. The spinach and all of that. So about all in all, they could save about half their garden, and I can tell you right now, she was one happy woman. So But she didn't know what a cucumber beetle looked like. So I found one and I showed her. She goes, well, there's a lot of them here. And I said, you got to get on top of those. You got to get on top of the Japanese beetles. And you got to get a control on those potato bugs. So they went right to town. When I left, they were still out in the garden picking all the bugs they could. So, folks, this is a really good example of never having gardened before. They did a lot of research. They put a lot of time and effort into clearing a land and making a garden out of just an opening in the woods, just like I did. And they bought their seeds. They did some research on what would grow best up here, and planted the way they should have been planted. So everything went good. Life went to hell for a while, for about a month. Everything is good now, though, or getting better. But they did everything right, and then life happened. Then life happened, folks, and they had to be away from their home for a month, right in the crucial part of growing a garden, right? So, but they can save it. I told them they still had time to grow spinach. They can grow Swiss chard. They can throw some more beans in the ground. They can throw some more beets in the ground. The only thing that I told them they probably didn't have time for was cucumbers. And maybe there's time for cucumbers, but their cucumbers were totally gone, folks. So they basically rotted. So they learned how to garden. Well, they learned how to plant. They learned what to do, but they didn't know a thing about garden bugs at all. They just thought they were awfully pretty bugs, and those 3 bugs are kind of pretty for a bug. They're kind of colorful, and so they're learning, folks. They're learning. At least they are given 110%. And because, like they said, they knew hard times were coming. They knew that they would probably have to take care of their mom. And that's before their child became sick. So, I give them an awful lot of credit, folks, because they're really, really trying. And I don't mind helping somebody out. I do not mind giving pointers. I do not mind. Life throws curveballs, right? They just throws curveballs, and if somebody is really, really trying, they need a hand up, right? They just need a hand up. So I think they're going to make it. Some things are set back, but that's okay. They can do a fall crop. But before I left, she was so excited. She goes, I want you to come in the house for a moment. So I said, yeah, let me get out of these wet shoes and everything. She goes, don't mind that. She come right in, and I stood at just inside the door on the rug, because I didn't want to track. And I saw this great big huge pile of ball cannon jars, folks. She had a box of which had unopened was a pressure canner. She had several canning books. Some looked like they were new. Some looked like they were maybe hand-me-downs, or ones she either got at a thrift store or maybe at a yard sale, or maybe it was her grandmother's. I don't know. Her mother didn't can. Her mother didn't have anything to do with the garden whatsoever, so she acquired them somehow. And I said, look at all the jars. And she goes, yeah, we spent quite a bit of money on those. I said, they're worth quite a bit of money right now. I said, but you can probably, I said, if you can save what's in your garden now, I said, you plant some fall crops, I said, you can probably fill every one of those gardens, every one of those jars. I said, because they're both hunters. They didn't garden, but they were hunters. So I asked them if they planned on hunting this year, and they said yes, and they usually get a deer every year. One of them, sometimes both. So they plan on putting some deer meat through the canner, and their gardens through the garden produce through the canner, and they'll be, as long as there's no more setbacks, they should be all right. They should be all right because they've got the want to learn. When I arrived there, they were very discouraged. They just wanted to give up. When I left, they were invigorated, and they felt a lot of promise, and they were so excited. But they knew they had a lot of work that they had to do. They were going to have somebody come in with a weed whacker and go down through the rows first and weed whack, and then he was going to rototill. That's their choice. That's their choice. It may be a good idea, or it may not be a good idea. It would probably save on the rototiller getting all tangled up, which I think was his point. So, if there's a will, there's a way, folks. And at least, even though they didn't know how to garden from start until they put it away, either up on a shelf or in a freezer or in jars, at least they got that far, right? They got that far. But I did tell them that I was jealous as hell that they had a nice, moist garden. And it wasn't muddy, folks. It wasn't muddy. It's gravel underneath, and they did a really, really nice job preparing that, and that was in the perfect spot, the absolute perfect spot to have a garden for this time of year, where it's so dry. I'm not really sure what's going to happen if another season we get a lot of rain. I'm not really sure. But it was gravel underneath, so it still should be all good. It should run down that slope and down through the soil and down through the gravel. It should. So it might not be so bad, folks. And again, I'm very jealous. Seems I still have a dry well, right? So it's those moments when I'm very, very glad to help. They did not give up. They wanted to save their garden. They wanted to learn, and they want to be more self-sufficient. And people like that who are willing to ask for help, who are willing to help themselves, who are willing to take advice from somebody that's gardened for years, I will go above and beyond to try to help them any way that I can. So don't give up, folks. You know, I've got an extremely dry garden. It does look pretty good right now, and we're not supposed to get rain, but my God, folks, it has been so friggin' hot. It has been so hot. It's just been insanely hot. So, and the humidity has been way up. Like I told somebody in an email, you look out, even from here to my house, you can just see the blue muggy haze in the air, and it's just gross. It's just really gross. But I think Thursday we might have a chance of getting some more rain, which is good. So I guess I'm not going to complain. But this is 20 minutes long, so I'm gonna stop this. You all have a good night. Don't give up on your gardens, and steadfast. Thank you.